Subscribe to Film Companion for your film fix. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.
Every single cliche of the Hindi movie is borrowed from Shakespeare. It's going to be very interesting to see what kind of a reaction a Salman Khan film gets on the OTT platform.
Hi, sir. Such a pleasure to have you on Film Companion. Let me begin by wishing you a happy belated 70th birthday. Aap jiyo hazaron saal and all that.
Thank you.
So, sir, you're a bona fide institution. You've been in front of the camera now for 53 years. IMDb lists 235 credits for you as an actor. You won 3 national awards. What does it take to get you excited about a role? What makes you say yes?
What inspires me, moves me now to participate in a project is the desire to be part of projects which will be remembered. Actors are remembered through their movies. You may be the most gifted actor in the world, but if you haven't done a movie that's going to be remembered, you're not going to be remembered either. So my desire to play the great parts has been long since fulfilled. I've done so many. I've been very fortunate to have been considered by so many of the filmmakers of the 70s. In fact, I was deluged by offers at that time, many of which I could not do. For some reason, I also kept getting movies. It's some reason I've never quite understood, but I did. My desire now is to be part of meaningful projects. My desire now is to spend time working with people whose company I enjoy, and a project which will give me something apart from money, which will give me some food for thought, something which I can sink my teeth into, something which is challenging, something like Bandish Bandits by Anand Tiwari, which is going to be streaming soon, was extremely challenging because I had to do a great deal of singing, lip syncing to classical singing, which is not the easiest thing to sync to. So that is what keeps me going, and the thought of live theatre, which is really my love in life. There are few things in life I enjoy more than being on the stage and getting across to the people there. It's the most wonderful feeling. It's like being in heaven, when you know that a play you're in is getting across. It's the most wonderful thing. One hasn't been able to do any theatre work naturally in the last 5 months, but we've been rehearsing on Zoom, and I've been preparing 2 or 3 things, which as soon as we are able, I will be able to stage. So, see, life is not obliged to provide you with challenges. You have to find them, I guess. So I wake up every morning determined to find a new challenge, whether it is learning how to trying to learn how to sing at this age. I'm trying very hard, and I'll sing yet. I will never be a Muhammad Rafi or anywhere near, but I'll be able to hold a note.
That's
someday.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So what excited you about playing this very sort of imperious Sangeet Samrat in Bandish Bandits?
No, because I could see a lot of my father in him. I could see a lot of some teachers I've had and who I've admired and loved, like Al-Qazi and Satyadev Dubey, in this man. A person who is very strongly opinionated, very strongly convinced that what he is doing is right, and will brook no other way. A person who is in fact very narrow-minded, but professes liberal. A person who schemes and plots to stay relevant. A person who's egoistic enough to disown his own son, and a person who's egoistic enough to give the gharana his name and hoping to perpetuate it via his descendants. So I don't mean to say that these teachers I met were exactly like this, but there are aspects of people who you borrow from when you do a role. You take this from that person and this from, you never model yourself on one particular person, I think. And so I found this character absolutely fascinating, with his, with his negativity, and the fact that he's responsible for much of the turmoil in the family. He's an imperious, dominating character, but he's not. He doesn't carry a gun, and he doesn't. He's not that kind of a gangster. He's a refined musician. So I've played.
He's an artist.
He's an artist and prides himself on that, and is pretty vain about it as well. And I've played parts where I played the gangster guy, or the top dog, and so on. This was a different kind of top dog. This was a man who kills with kindness, And so, and I felt it would be great fun to lip sync these classical songs sung by Pandit Ajay Chakravarti, composed by Ehsan Shankar Loy. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And I worked very hard at it. It gave me a lot to do before the shoot began. And I always have liked Anand Gandhi very much as a person. And I think he's a very good director as well.
So in your memoir, and then one day, you talk about that first experience of discovering what it was like to be on stage, to be an actor. And you described it as being submerged in lukewarm rose water, which is just the most beautiful line ever. How do you nurture this experience, this high, this kind of feeling of being submerged in this rose water? How have you nurtured it for more than 5 decades?
By trying to understand more about the nature of the stage. There was a time when I believed in realism on stage. I believed that when you perform a play, the viewers must feel this is actually happening. Everything must reflect life. It must be a slice of life. But I found that any of those kind of plays that I watched, which were set in a kitchen, or which were set in a bedroom, or a massage parlor or something like that, never really rang as true as I felt they should. Even the ones I saw abroad, because the audience never forgets they're in a theater, They can see the lights, they can see the curtains flapping, they can see through the wings and see people moving around backstage. They can see the proscenium. They have 200 people sitting around them. So how can they forget that? You can't expect them to. So it's futile to try to persuade them that this is actually happening. It's better to remind them that you're watching a play. Good evening. We are actors. You are an audience. Welcome. I hope you're comfortable. We're going to tell you a story about this and that, and you begin the play. So you demolish this so-called fourth wall. There's no fourth wall. The audience and actor are one. And that is why I like to, before the play begins, the actors to enter onto stage or be around on the stage and chatting with the members of the audience. I don't believe in creating this sense of mystery about the play. There's total silence and some heavy music is playing and there's violet lights and the audience sits in this, what the hell are we going to see kind of mood. I hate that. The audience must come there in a cheerful, receptive frame of mind. And the play should not destroy that. The actors must be flexible. And that is the philosophy with which I now work in the theater, because to me, it's a means of contact with people. I have a slight problem with people. I don't know why. It would take too long to talk about that, but I'm not very comfortable with strangers and so on. I find it difficult to start a conversation. On stage, I can get through to 200 people at Prithvi Theatre, 1,000 people at the Tata Theatre, 500 people at the Veer Savarkar Auditorium, and genuinely get through to them and know that being in contact with them. To me, that's very, very precious, much more precious than the applause and people coming backstage and telling me that they liked it. And so all these things are good. But to me, the act itself has a certain amount of holiness in it. That's the only word I can use. I don't like to use words like that in connection with acting. There's nothing metaphysical about acting. It's all hard work, it's labor. But there is a sense of the sacred at times. That's what it is. And that's why I enjoy the theater more, because it's a living thing. we've been doing the same play, several of the same plays for over 20, 30 years now. God, we've been doing for 40 years. You can keep finding things in great writing. Unlike a film where you've done it once, it's locked and it will be seen for eternity. Terrifies me. My film will be seen 100 years later. And people will say, what is this rubbish?
So after Irfan passed away, I read this lovely thing you said in an interview with the Indian Express. You said that when you watched him act, you always felt like Salieri to his Mozart.
Absolutely.
And I thought, you're such an incredible actor. What did you feel that he had that you didn't?
He was much more assured in his beliefs as an actor. I was not. I was only agitated. And a certain Vidhu Vinod Chopra will attest to that. I was an agitated young fellow who was not sure of himself, yet pretended to be sure of himself. And thus, I got into very many unpleasant situations with a lot of the filmmakers I worked with, all of whom luckily stayed friends. With Irfan, I never felt that sense of self-doubt. He was a more evolved actor than I was. And I felt, fuck, if I had only been, sorry for my French, but I think you can cut it out, that I just wish I had been this good when I was his age. And I feel that about several other young actors I see. I feel that about Rajkumar Rao. I feel that about Gulshan Devaiya, who's an absolutely stupendous actor. I wonder when the film industry is going to wake up to that enormous talent. Or or what one sees in actors like Arshad Varsi, or to an extent in Nawazuddin, and several others. I envy these chaps. They're much better actors at their age than we were at that age. And I think one can take a little bit of credit for that, because had we not been around, this generation would not have been around. In the same way as has the Balraj Sahnis and Motilals not been around, maybe Om and I would not have appeared. Those people formed the context for actors like Om and myself, like we formed the context for actors who are unusual. But that is what I felt about Irfan, that he's got his craft down. And I directed him in this terrible film I made. And I found him to be the most receptive, easiest to direct actor. I just had to tell him a thing once. And he would not only deliver, he would go beyond. I've seldom seen that. A lot of actors will do what you ask them to do. They won't give it their own color. Irfan did that. I don't think I've seen a weak performance by Irfan, except perhaps in parts of The Life of Pi, where he tried to do a Canadian accent or something which didn't work. But apart from that, I don't think I've seen a weak performance by Irfan.
So you've always been very vocal in your criticism of Hindi cinema and of the Hindi film industry. But right now, during this pandemic, all the systems have been upended. The very tragic passing of Sushant Singh Rajput has kind of unleashed a whole new conversation. There's a lot of focus on things that need to be fixed. Are you at all hopeful that we will use this as a time of introspection and actually mend what needs to be mended?
One can only hope for that, though the level of the debate is getting more and more juvenile, and I see it as completely unnecessary. Why are we washing our dirty underwear in public? Why are actors who have been content a lot suddenly complaining that they're not on the posters? Or why are actors who didn't get a certain film complaining that they didn't get it? They didn't get it. There are so many things, so many actors didn't get. Now, if every one of us starts enumerating our complaints, the film industry will seem like the worst place on earth, And I dare say that's true of any industry. My hope is that, first of all, I hope that this Sushant, poor Sushant, is laid to rest, and people just leave him alone. And my hope is that people will realize the futility of making blockbusting CT-inducing, applause-inducing, coin-throwing kind of movies, because that is probably not going to happen anymore. Not for a while, at least. It's going to be very interesting to see what kind of a reaction a Salman Khan film gets on the OTT platform. You know, people watching it alone in their homes, will they still throw coins at the screen? Will they still? No, they won't, because it's a fever which infects everybody. When there's 1,000 people there, willy-nilly you find yourself screaming and you find yourself laughing, you find yourself participating in that mass thing. That also explains the psychology of mobs, you know, where it takes no time at all to infect the whole mob. I've seen Rajnikant movies in the theater. I've seen Salman Khan movies in the theater, and I know how this works. You know, I felt it myself. So it'll be interesting to see how a family of 5 watching a blood-soaked revenge drama on above their dining table, you know, at home. How will they respond to it? Will these kind of movies last, or will the Bombay industry finally see sense, like Hollywood did after Cleopatra, did them in, and then Easy Rider, a small film made by 2 freaks on motorcycles, rescued Hollywood. So maybe they'll see the sense of smaller investments and overcome the greed of bigger profits. That's pipe dream maybe, but that is my hope.
So if you could choose like the one thing that you can change, that should change after the pandemic, what would it be? What do you really want to see done differently?
I wouldn't know where to begin. Yeah, I really wouldn't know where to begin. But I think that the bane lies in the fact that it is considered a currency manufacturing factory by most of the filmmakers. And not enough heed is paid to the writing. That is really the curse. And of course, all the superstitions about, you know, Mahurat date and this and my numerology and all this nonsense enters into the picture, which is very irritating, but there's nothing you can do about blind faith. But the level of the writing certainly the writers need to get more regard, but they will only get more regard if they come up with original ideas. And I think very few who come up with original ideas, because some of our biggest money spinners have been totally plagiarized movies. So plagiarization has become legitimate since the 70s, in fact. And I've often talked about this, that the decline began in the 70s with the coming of color, with the coming of several unworthy stars, and with the legitimizing of plagiarism. I'm not taking any names, but everybody knows that this is what happened then, until it came to a point where you have two music directors, both of whom had plagiarized the tune Come September, which is a tune I used to hear when I was in school, accusing each other of stealing their tune. I mean, how absurd can you get? This sounds like this, like this is written by Samuel Beckett or somebody, you know, this situation. So we have to lose our dependence on Shakespeare. I mean, we have got to stop borrowing from Shakespeare, first of all. It's just astounding. I've been in the lockdown, I've been going through all the Shakespeare plays I haven't read, and there are several. I've finished almost all of them by now. And it is astounding. You know, my argument has been totally solidified that every single cliche of the Hindi movie is borrowed from Shakespeare. Everything is there. Every masala formula is in Shakespeare. Every single one. So somehow we got to put old Shakespeare behind us. and I hope we can start using real life as a template. You know, the trouble is with our actors too, most of them, they don't use life as an inspiration. They use older actors' performances as their source material. And so do the writers, and so do the directors. अरे यार शोले में एक ऐसा सीन था, ऐसा डालते हैं. मदर इंडिया में ऐसा एक, गंगा जमुना में ऐसा एक सीन था, ऐसा एक कुछ सीन डालो. You know, it's sheer laziness which results in this kind of a thing. So there you are.
In your memoir, you described yourself as, and I want to quote this exactly, you said that you were trouble, unreasonable, opinionated, hot-headed, and a dope smoker. How much of this has changed?
None. None has changed. I don't think I'm trouble anymore. I'm trouble to some people, but much fewer. And as an actor, I have to say, and a lot of the directors from the 70s will be very relieved to hear this. I am not a troublesome actor any longer. I try to do what the director asks before launching into objections. I don't preach like I did with poor Kundan. I mean, I gave Kundan such a hard time in Jaane Bhi To Yaaro. I didn't know what he was up to, since I hadn't watched enough Marx Brothers work at that time. And what Kundan was trying to do was a Marx Brothers. After that, I watched all the Marx Brothers movies, and I kicked myself for saying, why did I, why was I not open? I was into method acting and stuff at that time, A thing has to be true to be effective. A thing can't be funny unless it's true, and so on. So the scene of the telephone, which everybody talks about, I mean, he and I had such a violent argument over it, and I gave the poor guy sleepless nights. But that is what I believed in at that time. Now, I couldn't have pretended that I was convinced. I wasn't. And that is what I meant when I said I was an agitated actor who was not sure of what he did. What Kundan was trying was absolutely valid, and it's pretty damn hilarious, despite my reluctance in doing that scene. So troublesome.
I read that. So I know you've been reading a lot of Faiz during this lockdown.
Yes.
Sorry, what?
No, I said I'm not troublesome anymore, but the other things are still true, opinionated and so on. And yes, I've been reading a lot of Faiz. I discovered Faiz shortly after discovering Ghalib. And before Ghalib, I felt that Wordsworth and, Shelley and Keats are the only poets in the world. These Urdu poets, what do they write about? Romance and love and sharab and kebab and gulab. Urdu poetry is all sentimental bosh. This was my ignorant opinion. Through Ghalib, I discovered Urdu poetry. I discovered the Urdu language, which is the first language I learned to speak, first language I heard. So I could pick it up easily. And then I realized Ghalib is talking of things that T.C. talked about 100 years later. And some of his stuff is so profound, and it is so deep, and it is so amazingly perceptive about life and death and the hereafter, and about God and about faith and about everything, every subject under the sun. Gulzar Bhai told me that a massive amount of Ghalib's writing is lost, what he wrote in Farsi. It's all lost. I don't know Farsi, so I don't feel the pinch, but you can imagine what a scholar would feel. And then gradually I started reading a bit of Faiz, a bit of Iqbal, a bit of Firaq, Gorakhpuri. And I keep going back to English poetry also to read Keats and to read Shelley and Robert Frost and so on. But I think Faiz is probably the greatest poet of the 20th century.
So is there one thing that you learned through his poetry that you might like to share with all of us that will help us also get through the lockdown?
There's one which is it's a little difficult to understand, so I'll explain it first. It's called dua, prayer. And what really moved me was that ye dua apne liye nahi mang rahe the, Faiz Sahab. And that has always been my big grouse against organized religion. कि आप हमेशा दुआ जब मांगते हैं आप गिड़गिड़ाते हैं. This is also something which Ghalib says to his wife. In fact, Ghalib says to her, somebody on the motorcycle, Ghalib says to her, when she's constantly praying and so on, he says कि तुमने किसी बच्चे को अपनी माँ के सामने इस तरह गिड़गिड़ाते हुए देखा है जिस तरह तुम अल्लाह मियाँ के सामने गिड़गिड़ाती हो. कि मेरे रिश्ते अल्लाह मियाँ से तुमसे कहीं ज्यादा बेतकल्लुफ है, इनफॉर्मल. मुझे गिड़गिड़ाने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ती. So this is a prayer which Faiz says for all of humanity. I don't really know. I don't think he was a terribly religious person during his life, but towards the end of his life, so I've been told by Muniza Appa and Salima Appa, his daughters who I know, that he did turn somewhat religious, did lead the prayers in his village. He went back to the place where he was born and he wanted to spend some time there. All his poetry, Faiz never wrote a flippant poem. Faiz never wrote anything pulka. He never wrote about thwarted love and so on. Even his Mujhse Pehli Si Mohabbat is not a romantic poem at all. It's a strongly political poem. People don't bother to read through it because those first few lines are so beautiful. Everybody knows them. Teri aankhon ke siwa rakha kya vagera. But after that, it goes into very bitter territory. And he talks of, what he's learned from this loss. So in this poem, he says, आइए हाथ उठाएं हम भी, आइए हाथ उठाएं हम भी, हम जिन्हें रस्म दुआ याद नहीं. आइए हाथ उठाएं हम भी, हम जिन्हें रस्म दुआ याद नहीं, उन्हें सोज़ मोहब्बत के सिवा कोई बुत कोई खुदा याद नहीं. आइए अर्ज गुजारें कि निगार हस्ती जहर इमरोज में शीरीनी फरदा भर दे. Now that's a very difficult one. What it means is, let us pray that that the hope of tomorrow will fill the bitterness of today with the sweetness of the future. Nigar hasti. Nigar means writing. Hasti is living. In Nigar hasti zahr imroz, the poison of today, में शीरीनी फरदा भर दे. वो जिन्हें ताब गिरां बारी अय्याम नहीं, उनकी पलकों पे शबो रोज को हल्का कर दे. जिनकी आंखों को रुख सो का यारा भी नहीं, उनकी रातों में कोई शम्मा मुनव्वर कर दे. जिनके कदमों को किसी राह का सहारा भी नहीं, उनकी नजरों पे कोई राह उजागर कर दे. And the rest of it is very, very difficult. But basically it is, may those under oppression find the courage to rise. May those who oppress have the good sense to realize what they are doing. That's the juz of the last four lines. Everybody gets very awed when they listen to Urdu of this level because they say Arey Yara. But the fact is, if you just listen carefully, there are several words in this that you know and which you even use. But when combined with a prefix or a suffix, they become complex words. So that is really a prayer which, the prayer said for all the helpless in the world.
I know that you've only given us half an hour, and I promise I'm going to be done soon. In the last couple of years, you've made news for some very frank opinions. You've spoken very openly about many things, whether it's, Rajesh Khanna, Virat Kohli, your concern for your kids, because we are now living in an increasingly polarized world. Do you ever sort of stop and say to yourself that, okay, maybe I'm not going to say this because it's just too tiring to deal with all the noise? Do you ever get exhausted? Do you ever censor yourself?
Sometimes, when I realize that I'm perhaps preaching to the converted, it's impossible to have a rational argument with a person who's made up his mind. And so perhaps the things I said about, say, Rajesh Khanna were uncalled for. I overlooked the fact that there are millions who loved him and must have hurt. I was not making a direct attack at him. I was talking about a system which encouraged and nurtured mediocrity. That was my real intention, and unfortunately, people took it personally. Anyway, the only person I really care about who was hurt was Dimple, and I apologize to her for hurting her feelings. But I also said I do not take back my words. And uh, about Virat Kohli, I don't take anything back, nor about any of the others.
So you're definitely not getting more mellow with age.
Well, I don't yell at my actors anymore. Not much, at least. Much less compared to what I used to do. No, but see, it's as simple as this, Anu, that if you feel a thing needs to be said, it has to be said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell me finally about how do you feel about this sort of new rule, about not hiring actors who are over 65 because it's now too dangerous. Do you have a concern for yourself, or are you at that point of serenity where it is what it is?
No, it's not that. See, the actors above 65 are too many in number and too indispensable. I'm not the only one. There's so many, starting with Mr. Bachchan, who's 75. They can't do without him. Maybe they can do without me. But then there's so many, in between, all of whom are above 65. You need elderly characters in any movie. You can't make a film about youth without having elderly characters in it, even. So we will be accommodated sooner or later. It's the others in the unit that I'm concerned about. What if a makeup man is over 65? What if a hairdresser is over 65? What if an extra is over 65? What if a dancer can't be 65, but there can be so many other departments, the spot boys, the light boys, the camera attendants. They are easy to get rid of, you know. So this above 65 thing is an absurd rule, and I don't know who came up with it. Because does just crossing the threshold of 65 mean you're in danger? If you're 64, you're safe.
Okay.
It doesn't make any sense at all. And I just hope the film industry is large-hearted enough to recognize this fact and go out of their way to accommodate, because it breaks my heart to think of what the daily wagers have been doing over the last 5 months, particularly those who've not been wise enough to save. It's the waiters in restaurants, the people who work in the kitchens, the shop attendants, the guys who sell fruit on the road. There were these two flower sellers just down, if you've ever been down St. Paul's Road towards Hill Road, there are these two flower sellers on either side of the road just after Bandra Gym. I mean, it would gladden my heart every morning to see that sight. Rows and rows and rows of flowers on either side of the road, which were being sold. I don't know what's happened to those two guys. They vanished and they haven't come back. So actors don't have as much to worry about as some others.
So thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure to listen to you.
Thank you, Anu. Nice seeing you again.